Good morning. I'm Sean, this is Liz, and we're going to talk a little bit about gender. First thing I wanted to start with is simply saying that gender is not black and white. It's not one or the other, it's not this or that, and that's sort of what society tells us. But there's so much more to gender and gender identity than that. So I figured we start with some basics. So if you go to the first piece of your handout, we have the lovely genderbread person. This is a teaching tool that I learned in college and a lot of organizations use. And it basically helps describe the differences between sex, gender, gender expression, all things like that. So we'll start with gender identity. Gender identity is here. Gender identity is a person's sense of self in terms of gender, how you see and feel yourself. Next, we'll go to sex. Sex is here. Sex is physical. Sex is the physical characteristics by which a person is designated as male, female, or intersex. And then lastly, there's gender expression. Gender expression is the ways in which we each choose to express masculinity, femininity, androgyny, outwardly. That's how we express that gender identity that we have in here. That's how we put it out there for the rest of the world to see. And gender, our society tells us that gender is binary, meaning two. You're male or you're female. If you're not one, then you're automatically the other. From young age, we are forced into a box of what we're supposed to be based on what we were designated at birth. You know, baby pops out, doctor looks, says it's a boy, it's a girl. And based on that determination, you're taught who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to like, what you're supposed to wear, what you're supposed to look like. You know, we're given identifiers, labels, and expectations. But again, gender is not at all black and white. There's a full spectrum of gender identities, which is depicted in your second picture. This is a little trans umbrella. And it's got a list of every gender identity that I could possibly think of to label. But you take a look at it, there's so much more than people generally think when you think of gender. So that's sort of the basics. And then we're going to go to Liz.
Made it. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz. My preferred pronouns are she and her, and that's something rather important to the issues of gender and how people identify themselves. Because as Sean says, when born we're assigned a sex based upon what the physician sees when we pop out. And from that point on, there are a series of social expectations that are all placed on us, some more so than others, some more forced than others, but they're still there, and we all are brought up with those. And they tend to define our lives until some point. And that some point will change and vary a lot for each of us. So, this is my wisdom today. Emphasis on my wisdom. It's because each of our experiences is different. And it's particularly true of those in the trans community, that each of our individual paths, how we got to where we are today and where we're going in the future, is different and from everyone else's. And it makes for both an exciting and sometimes infuriating stew that we have to deal with. Sean and I spent a lot of time yesterday on text and email, putting this all together, and kind of evolved out the idea that what we want to share with you today is not so much a lecture, I'm good at those. I put my students to sleep all the time with those. But kind of approach the idea of the variation and the differences that exist in terms of gender. And from my side of the world, that of being a transsexual woman, and if you look on it's the third page of your handout, there's a big purple umbrella. We both are into umbrellas when we put this together. It also brings in a lot of different labels under the transgender umbrella. And between the two umbrellas, you really get a sense that it's an extremely diverse community. And I have my slot under that umbrella. Others have their other slots in that umbrella. So I can really only talk to my slot of where I am. Now, I am a transsexual woman. I've kind of known this for a long time, but really not a lot of my life. I was born with male genitalia. I was brought up as the eldest of two. I have a younger sister. There were expectations of me in my family and my community, which, darn it all, I tried to adhere to strictly. And it was only, my daughter's 25, so I think I could say 23 years ago, maybe. And thanks to the wonders of the internet, what we would do without the internet, I don't know, in the trans community. Thanks to the wonders of the internet, I actually stumbled across information about trans people, about transsexuals. And to me, it was the proverbial light bulb. It was, I kind of felt I was in a cartoon and that light bulb showed up above my head. This was me. This is who I was. And since I've only been out a year, you can tell it's been quite a long time to get to this point in my life. I was married at the time, had, as mentioned already, my daughter. She was young at that point, and to me, she was more important than anything else. So I stuck all this out and did the usual trans thing. In life, buy clothes, dress up, maybe go out, throw away clothes, tamp it down, buy more clothes, dress up, go out. I think I've thrown more clothes away in my life than most people have in their closets now. In any regard, guilt. That's not who I was supposed to be. I was a male, a husband, a father. My responsibilities were to be the one to bring home the income in the household, to defend my family, all those things guys are told they're supposed to be in life. And so when I would stray from those social norms, there was a lot of guilt attended with that. And then you tap in the guilt that existed, the depression that existed after the session of being dressed, having to get undressed, take off makeup, because daughter was going to be home within an hour, kind of thing. It was up and down, up and down, and up and down, finally to the point where it was going to destroy life for everybody. So that's when I started going to the psychologist. That would be 4 years in October. Told my psychologist last year, it was our anniversary, we should go out to dinner. So that took a while, and it took another, let's see, that was 4 years, say another 2 years of working as a psychologist before it came out to now my ex-wife, who did not take this too well. But thankfully my daughter did. My daughter somehow or other turned out to be an ally, and when I asked her about that, she kind of said, well, it's kind of the way it brought up. Mom and you told me to be fair, to everybody, told me and showed me to do that, and so that's the way I turned out. Okay, hey, if it works, it works. So it's been a journey, and for all of us, it's a journey. I'm within 24 days of making my first year being out full time. There's an organization called WPATH, the World Professionals of the Transgender Health, something like that. And there are standards of care. And those standards of care pretty much list how healthcare professionals, both medical and mental health professionals, are supposed to deal with transgender people, particularly transsexual people, and dealing with the transition. And that 1 year is very important, being able to be out and living full time for that year at work, earning monies, functioning, quote, normally, unquote, in society. So I'm almost there, which is really kind of cool. I am a pre-op transsexual. I don't tell that to everybody, though I tend to be rather more vocal than some about these kind of things. And it's one of the questions you don't ask people about. And we'll get into some of those in just a few moments. And you don't ask about surgeries either. If anybody asks me, well, what's the surgery entail? I say, go the movie Trans, go watch the movie Trans. You can get all the details you want. So there are resources out there to do that kind of thing. Most people, as I just mentioned, most trans people won't talk about surgery because it's a private thing. It's, health care, status of one's health is considered to be private in our society, and we all hold that rather dear. There's all kinds of laws and regulations we also have to deal with in that area. And, in addition, a discussion of something like surgery could go on for a rather long time. Many trans people have more than one surgery. They get rather involved, and that could be a lengthy discussion. So questions about who we are and how we got here, how we want to be treated by the world, in many ways are what helps define gender and trans people in particular. And it's one way we get to relate to everybody. And I hope to give you a few questions today which will help you understand that, and help understand some of the gender differences that we have to deal with. So what I want to do basically is go through some kind of questions. That kind of questions trans people get all the time. And of course, that's a generalization. Not all of us have received these questions, but if you've paid attention to any of the news, you know that Katie Couric, for instance, was asking Laverne Cox about her surgery. What are her body parts? And she was quietly put into place. Janet Mock has been a little more verbal about those kind of things. So my intent right now is to go through some of these questions and then at the end say, how would you approach and talk with a trans person? Keeping in mind, proper etiquette and not looking to pry. And that's all going to come down to common sense. How we want to treat everybody, not just trans people. Were you born a boy? That's a real common one. Were you born? You'll know. Well, I was born with male genitalia. Everybody told me I was a boy. But the gender identity thing is a social construct. Society builds that for us. Society builds the roles we're supposed to enact, how we're supposed to dress, as Sean said, and the like. So that all comes later as one grows up, and your expectations of your parents and your family are put into place, so that we have to deal with. Okay, I promised I wouldn't walk around, but I'm going to walk around real quick. So the gender identity piece came later. And for me, it was one that really got tamped down, and I very much tried to behave and enact the roles I was supposed to. I'm a preacher's kid. I was brought up in small communities in northeastern Pennsylvania. Everybody in the communities knew my father. And, I was expected to act a certain way, so darn it all if I didn't act that way. When I finally figured out this was going on, and over the last 23 years, looking back, I've kind of been able to resolve certain things about my earlier life that now make some sense given my gender identity. For instance, I had a dream that was very vivid and has stuck with me to this day. of being in a locked car dressed as a girl, screaming and yelling. I asked my mother about a year ago, did you ever dress me as a girl for Halloween? And she said, no. So, because my interpretation of that dream had always been that, I was remembering something in my dream that my parents did, dress me as a girl, and I refused to go out for Halloween as a girl trick-or-treating. Nope, didn't have it. Instead, what happened, it was just a dream. And at this point, my interpretation is that was me wanting to get out and screaming to get out, but I wouldn't do that. I just tamped it all down and made it go away. So I was born with male genitalia. As I grew up, I was probably never really a boy, though I acted that way. The rest came later. Are you a male or female? Are you gay, Gail? A guy? Well, again, for me, I hope it's rather obvious. I haven't been challenged by it, which is kind of cool. And believe me, it's really neat to go into some place and be told someone say, "May I help you, ma'am?" or "miss." Oh, that's really cool. So, yeah, I'm a woman. Plain and simple. I have a driver's license in Pennsylvania with my picture on it with an F in there for gender. My Social Security records and all those in the IRS now have an F in there for gender. And the judge said I have a woman's name. Did that last December. That was the coolest thing. I told Sean yesterday that lights could have gone off in the courtroom, and it still had plenty of light because I was just beaming at the time that happened with the judge. So, yeah, I'm not a guy. I'm a woman. And that's one of the questions, again, you don't ask. You don't ask. Unless it's volunteered. And conversation is opened up, but a lot of trans people won't open up that conversation. When did you decide to become trans? I don't think I decided to become trans. There's been a discussion back and forth in the trans community, in the literature, about using the word transgendered, turning transgender, a noun, into a verb. And the English language grammar purists have fits about that. Many of us, and we've talked to trans people about this, many of us say turning it into a verb, particularly the past tense verb, is an indicator of our voyage, of the path we have gone through, of what we've had to deal with over life. Saying I'm transgendered is a reflection of everything we've grown to learn about ourselves, have come to understand about ourselves, and are now at the position we are in life. So there's some debate about that. But in any case, I didn't decide to become trans. I realized I was trans. It was that light bulb I mentioned to you earlier. The internet, wonderful thing. And it does cause a reflection in life, and that's what the psychologist is for too. Under the standard of care, trans people who are going to transition, and again, I'm not going to talk for everybody, because not all trans people actually go through the medical procedures, the hormone replacement therapy, the surgeries, like I have chosen to do. Not everyone has done that or will do that. So each of our paths, again, is different as we go about dealing with that. How am I doing with time, Sean? The clock's not working. Okay. I'll pick it up a little bit. Do you think you're crazy? I actually asked my psychologist that about the third visit. I looked at her and said, "Am I crazy?" She goes, No, I checked that out the first day. Went through the whole checklist. You're not crazy. Whew. I had a bit of a relief because, I did wonder. I'm going against all these social norms, so thankfully I'm not crazy. And so I don't think you can ask that one of trans people either. I saw this picture of you before your transition, and, well, it doesn't matter what the "and" is, what comes after that. But, my kind of response, well, gee, that's nice. That's nothing that I want to deal with. For many trans people, that's quite painful. For many trans people I've talked to, basically want to draw a real bit stiff line, draw a build a big wall between what was and what is now, and forget the past. The past in many ways was good to me. I don't necessarily want to forget all that, but it is kind of weird looking at those pictures. My mother has my senior high school picture. And, you know, I don't want to tell you how long ago that was. Still on a shelf in her living room, alongside my sisters. I can understand that. But just for the heck of it, yesterday I typed my old name into Google, and gosh, there's pictures there too. I can really feel for those people in Europe who brought that case, requesting that Google destroy certain information when requested on the web. I mean, if we could do that, there's some things I know I would go through and take out too. So in general, for a trans person, that's not a question we want to talk about. We're interested in where we are now, not where we came from, generally speaking. This is probably one of the biggest issues in the trans community right now. One of the issues that causes the most pain, the most headache. Which bathroom do you use? I don't understand the bathroom business myself either. You know, we all do it. We all have to. It's a tool, a device, get it done. Well, I use the one that's appropriate for a woman. A woman by gender, you know. So I used the women's room just earlier. I mean, the right wing uses that question to create fear of peeping, fear of rape. But as my psychologist says, and I don't want, she must be in her 40s, Michelle says that I've been using the women's room all my life and no one has ever bothered me. So it's really in many ways a created issue, but it's still out there, and it's oftentimes the very first one that pops up and that people will ask. And it's important for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is not all trans people are comfortable in using either. There are barriers there. A trans woman, someone presenting as trans, which is pretty odd, may be very uncomfortable going to the women's room. But on the other hand, the men's room may be a very unsafe place in some situations. So they're kind of caught in between. You know, unisex, sex, gender neutral restrooms are great, particularly if they're single occupancy. And believe there are OSHA regulations on all that stuff. I looked it up as part of my transition plan for work. You know, how many water closets, OSHA calls them, should be in each building, and this and that and the other things. But a single water closet in a locked room is just fine. There can be a problem with gender-neutral restrooms too. They can be used to segregate trans people. You often will see here or see in the press about the children in schools. They have to go to the nurse's restroom, or they have to use the faculty restroom. It can often become a situation where the trans kids are stigmatized because of bodily functions. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So it becomes a complicated issue for people. And basically, as I mentioned, use the women's restroom. If I go out in the world, be out at a restaurant and dinner with my mother, for instance, I'll use the women's restroom. Not been an issue at all. For me here in the Lehigh Valley, it's been actually really kind of great. My transition's been comparatively easy compared to many others. So those are some of the questions that often come up that you don't want to ask trans people because they generate discomfort, they generate in some cases fear, and they don't provide you with a lot of really good information to understand a trans person, understand trans people. Rather, here's some questions that you might want to actually use. First, ask permission to ask questions, which you would do with almost anybody, right? I mean, how comfortable is someone answering questions? I'll answer anything personally, and I tell this to people, I'll answer anything, except maybe the surgery question, though I'll let you in on that one a little earlier. And a little more than just go see the trans movie, which I'll tell everybody else. But, you know, just simply asking something like, hey, do you mind if I ask you some things about your transition? Been a little curious. Feel free not to answer or to say no. That's all you have to do to approach somebody and ask. avoid private and personal questions. I mean, I'm pretty open, as I just mentioned, but I'm not going to talk about my sex life, which is another question trans people often get. What do you do in the bedroom? Well, I sleep. What do you do in the bedroom? If you really want to kind of know about that question, that real personal question, there's this thing called the internet. Google, a search engine, a browser. You can actually find out a lot about that. Not all of it's right, but it's out there. Do not ask questions that in any way challenge a trans person's gender identity or expression, or could obviously lead to, that's an interesting way to put it, lead to dysphoria. I was watching Trans Again last night, and a segment on the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference, and one of the speakers was talking about in a female-to-male group about testosterone replacement therapy. And he said, do not expect that taking testosterone will add 6 inches to your height. It is not going to happen. I mean, testosterone is pretty powerful stuff, but, we're still limited by our genes. So asking a trans man if they'll grow to average male height is somewhat inappropriate. Asking a trans woman about the size of her hands, well, I still have my genes. They're there. What can I do? Those kind of questions call out a person's gender identity. They call out the differences. They make that person exceptional and very, very uncomfortable. So don't ask those kind of questions. Instead, phrase your questions in ways that affirm a trans person's gender. Not asking about the way you were, but the way you are. About the future, about your dreams, about your desires, about where you want to go to. You can ask about the steps it takes to become legally female, legally male in this country. In Pennsylvania, what do you have to do to change your name? Those are all good questions someone wants to ask and exchange that information. And finally, avoid comparisons to non-trans people. There's no real women out there. Are you a real woman? You don't look like a real woman, or wow, you look really like a real woman. You think more in terms of not the differences, but the commonalities. What we're trying to do with our life. And when it comes down to it, this is just an envelope for the rest of us. And how we want to be in the world, how we want to contribute to the world, how we want to talk with the rest of the people in the world. And that's what's really important, not as much the outside envelope. So that's my piece of it. John, I'm going to pass back to you.
Well, hello again. Most of you know me, but just in case you don't know too much about me, my name is Sean. I'm 24. I identify as genderqueer, and my personal preferred pronouns are neutral. I came out about a year and a half ago. At the age of 23, I started my coming out process. And it's been one of the greatest, happiest, most challenging experiences of my life. When I started coming out, some of my friends embraced me immediately. Other friends don't speak to me anymore. When I came out to my family, some of my family from the day that I came out to them have called me Sean. I have family who are helping me figure out the legal process of changing my name. Other family don't really acknowledge the existence of Sean. So it's been challenging, but it's the most satisfying and happiest I've ever been in my life. as I said, I identify as genderqueer. And what that means to me personally is that I fall somewhere between the two binary options of male or female. Kind of a combination of the two. As I talked about before, gender identity is here. Gender identity is how you feel and see yourself internally. And for me, it's not just about being uncomfortable in girls' clothes. It's not just about, preferring activities that most people would label me a tomboy for liking. It goes far beyond that. It's feeling uncomfortable being identified as female or male all the time. It's a feeling and a desire that I belong somewhere in the middle. I don't belong being labeled female at all times, and I don't belong on the other side of the spectrum at all times. I belong in the middle. It's feeling uncomfortable and like I don't fit in when I use a women's restroom some days, and having that exact same feeling if I use a male restroom other days. It's being in the middle for me. So that's sort of me a little bit. I'm in the middle. I'm neutral is the best way, I guess you can describe it. But I want to talk a little bit about sort of things that we in the non-binary community wish people knew. Because in the last few years, the trans community as a whole has gotten a lot more media attention. You've got actresses like Laverne Cox, you've got athletes like Fallon Fox coming and putting a face to transgender people in the media, and that is fantastic. That is awesome to see. But there's more to the trans community than that even. There's more to the gender variant community than those who choose to transition from female fully to male or vice versa. There's me. So I guess the first thing that is important to realize is that no two journeys with gender are going to be exactly the same. What's right for one person may not be right for another. And that includes people that use the same label. When I said I'm genderqueer and what that means to me, the reason that I explain what that means to me is because what that means to somebody else might be totally different, or it might just be slightly different. But gender is a completely personal and unique experience for each of us. We each experience gender uniquely. So even if it's the same label, that journey is going to be a little bit different. The meaning of that label is going to be just a little bit different. The next thing would be that the incredible magnitude and importance of respecting someone's gender identity and preferences when they choose to express them to you. Names, pronouns, identifiers and adjectives, everything like that. Do your best to respect and support, even if you don't fully understand it. When a person comes out to you about their gender identity, they've expressed to you that this is who they are as a human being. They've put themselves in an incredibly vulnerable position. But in reality, what it is someone wanting to just live authentically as the person that we've always known ourselves to be internally. Now we're choosing to put it out there for everybody else to see. And we just want that validated. Just like everybody wants their life, what they contribute to the world, to be validated, to be accepted, to be respected. It's the same thing when someone chooses to come out about their gender identity. So even if you don't understand it, even if you don't understand why, even if you don't understand why now, even if you don't understand the terminology that they're using, still do the very best that you can to show that person that even if you don't fully get it yet, you still respect them as a person, because that's what it comes down to. And one of the things that comes up when someone doesn't understand quite often, and this is a question that my parents have asked me, why is a name change so important to you? Liz was talking about her process to legally change her name. I'm beginning that process soon, hopefully. But why is it so important? A name is a part of a person's identity. And a preferred name, or a new name, is chosen with incredible thought, emotion, and it's not a decision that we take lightly at all. It's a name that person feels expressed outwardly, the person that they know themselves to be internally. There are a variety of reasons why specifically someone might give you that they feel the need to change their name. I asked a bunch of my friends, and some of the responses they gave me said their given name, it just feels like it doesn't fit. It doesn't belong. Some of them said that they feel detached from it and like it belongs somewhere else. It belongs with somebody else. And this is, for me personally, it ties them to your former identity. It ties you to the experiences that you had growing up where you were forced into that box that I was talking about earlier. And that's what we're trying so hard to get out of, is that box that we've been shoved into our entire lives. And so a name is a piece of that. Or because of society and the assumptions that are made based on finding out somebody's name. Someone comes up and introduces themselves as Jonathan. Most of us automatically and subconsciously, it's not even like an intentional conscious thing, but you hear someone identify themselves as Jonathan, you subconsciously already in your mind view them as a male. And so for someone like me, my given name is Bethany. And I feel like when I introduce myself as Bethany, automatically I'm already a female in that person's mind. Regardless of what I do or what I say after that point, I'm a female to them. So I chose a name, Sean, which is considered neutral. It can be used in males or females. It's more common in males, but that's also part of why I chose it, because I feel that I lean a little more towards the masculine side of the gender spectrum. So it just sort of felt right. And felt like it fit me when I came upon it and chose it. And another thing that's important to realize is that gender identity intersects in every single aspect of a person's life. Every aspect. It's not just signing your name somewhere. It infiltrates every second of your day. Imagine going around all day long, being called a name that makes you really, really uncomfortable by everybody you encounter every day. Or having to use a certain bathroom even though you don't feel entirely uncomfortable with it. Because there are no bathrooms available for people who identify and feel like you do. Automatically being referred to with pronouns that don't fit you based on how you look, the assumption someone just made about you after you introduced yourself with your name, things like that. Those are experiences that trans people and any gender variant people experience every day. It's not just when you have to sign your name. It's anytime someone says your name, anytime there's some sort of pronoun used, anytime there's some sort of identifier used. If you walk into a room, we've genderized adjectives: beautiful, handsome. If I walked up to you and called you beautiful, people would think I was a little weird, you know? Like, we've genderized everything in society. And so gender infiltrates every aspect of someone's life. And that's, I think, very important to realize, that it's not a person making a big deal out of a little thing. It's not someone being petty about their name being gendered one way or the other, and then that's the only way it comes into their life. It's every single aspect of your life. In some way, gender will enter that aspect. Which is why it's important for many of us to come out, to be verbal about who we feel we are. Because every second it consumes you. That's been my experience. Every second of every day, that feeling of not belonging, that feeling of something's wrong with me because I don't fit into this box that I'm being told I fit into, followed me all day long, every day. And that'll wear on a person. That'll wear really, really hard on a person. Next thing I want to talk about is how you can best respect and support a gender variant loved one or person. First thing, again, has to do with names, pronouns, identifiers. Do your best to remember. I think it's fair to say none of us expect you to automatically, right away, be able to remember that that person just changed their name, their pronoun, their identifiers, their labels, everything like that by the next day. That would be a little unfair of us to expect. But do your best. And again, even if you don't understand, still do your best to remember and to express it. That person is putting themselves in a really vulnerable position by being completely authentic with you, especially in a society that tells us that the gender variant or genderqueer community doesn't even exist. There's only male and female. That's what our society tells us. So when I'm talking about the gender variant community outside of the binary or in between the binary, it's even more so. Society just doesn't like to acknowledge the existence of our population. So when someone's coming out to you, it's a big deal. That's a big, big thing. Second thing, don't make any assumptions. Just don't. My personal experience, when I came out, in an effort to immediately show how much some of my friends supported me, many people automatically jumped to using all male pronouns, identifiers, and labels for me. They made that decision and assumption with good intention of wanting to outwardly express that they supported me, but it was based on assumption. Really, I identify as neutral. I don't identify fully male. I don't identify fully female either, but I identify somewhere in the middle. So for me, my personal pronouns aren't just male. My personal pronouns are neutral. And for those who struggle because grammar says that they cannot be used in a singular pronoun form, I like mixed labels and pronouns. If I'm having a conversation with you, or you're talking about me, you can say, Sean's an awesome person. He just did this fantastic thing. She is my best friend. He, she, he, she, he, she. I like that. That makes me smile when someone does that. But again, in an effort to show how much they supported me immediately, which I appreciate, people still made assumptions. And yet, a lot of LGBT people did. Excuse me. So don't make any assumptions. If you're unsure of something, ask respectful questions. Respectful being the key. Some okay questions to ask somebody. What are your preferred pronouns? For me personally, I would rather someone ask me than try to assume in order to avoid asking me questions making me uncomfortable. I would rather you ask me something if you're unsure about it than to try and figure it out yourself. because if you happen to try and figure it out for yourself and be wrong, that has potential to put me in a lot more of an awkward and uncomfortable position than being asked. That's my personal experience and preference. Another okay question. What would you like to be referred to as or with for pronouns? Or should I use your preferred name in this setting? Meaning, are you out yet here? Making sure that someone is out and asking them if they're out in a certain setting can be very, very important. I've been outed. Unintentionally, they didn't realize it, but I've been outed to large groups of people before. I was outed to some of my family because someone just didn't realize that I hadn't had that conversation yet. And that put me in a really, again, really awkward position, because then these other people are coming at me and hearing this and being like, who is Sean? What? That happened with my 14-year-old little sister. And that was an important conversation. You know, she's 14, she's my best friend, that's important. So be careful and ask and make sure that someone is out and comfortable being referred to in this new way, this new name, these new pronouns, before you do it, just to avoid and make sure that you're not going to accidentally out someone. Some questions on the other side that are not ever appropriate to ask. Anything about any part of a person that is hidden by their clothes and is not acceptable to show without clothes in public, you don't talk about. You don't ask them. If someone chooses to volunteer that information, that's fine. But don't ever, 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 ever walk up to someone and ask them about their private parts. It's none of your business. Unless that person chooses to engage that conversation with you, it's just not your business. Liz gave a great example of, what was her name? Katie Couric did an interview with Laverne Cox, who's a trans actress, and she really pushed these personal questions, and it's just not cool. If you're a cisgender person, meaning cisgender is a term that means you're given sex that you were labeled when you were born, and your gender identity, how you feel as a person, match up and are in alignment. So if you were determined to be a female and you're comfortable with that and you feel that that fits you, you're identified as cisgender. I would never walk up to a cisgender person and ask them something about their boobs. You just don't do it. It's weird. Like, it's just awkward. So why would you do it to a trans person or a non-binary person, you know? Another question that you probably shouldn't ask, and Liz mentioned this one, when did you become trans? Or when did you decide that you were trans? I never decided to be trans. I decided to come out with my trans identity or my non-binary identity, for me, my genderqueer identity. I made a decision to be public about that, but I didn't make a decision for that to be here. Just like we talk about and we fight in the LGBT community, people ask you, when did you become gay? Or why would you choose to be gay? It wouldn't. I didn't. And it's the same exact thing for gender variant people. Anything or any question or statement that implies that this might just be a stage, that there's something wrong with that person, questioning why they're doing this or making that decision, don't do that. I mentioned it before, but it's worth mentioning again. When someone comes out to you, they're doing it because they want to live authentically as the person that they are. And they want the exact same thing that every single other human being wants. You want your identity and your humanness validated. You want to be acknowledged as not the weird kid, not someone who's different, not someone who has something wrong with them, just as a human being. And it's the same exact thing. You just want to be validated. You want to have the opportunity to live authentically. So anything that implies that there's something wrong with them, that they're different or weird, that they're making it up for attention, not okay, ever. I've experienced some of these things. It doesn't feel good. Another one is, what was your name? Or what did your name used to be? Me personally, I don't mind that too much, but that can be a really, really sensitive thing for someone. We talked about why changing name can be so important to someone. For me, it's a feeling of being tied to that identity that I was forced to live in for 20 some odd years. So asking someone what their name was or what their name used to be can cause that person to have to go back to that identity. And that was an uncomfortable place for them. There's a reason they came out. There's a reason that they found a label outside of what they were determined at birth and have now begun to use that label. It's because they weren't comfortable and it didn't feel right in the label that they were given. A name is part of that. So that's also very important and can be a very, very sensitive issue for somebody. So those are sort of just questions that are okay, not okay to ask. That's sort of what I have. What time is it? I got 5 minutes? Okay. I can make stuff up for 5 minutes. So, would you like to?
Yeah, I can toss something in too.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's been interesting sitting here listening to you, Sean, because there are some interesting commonalities, but there are also contrasts. Me, you can think of gender on a scale, on a continuum. You have spectrum. You have on one side you have female, the other side male, and by that I really connote the socially imposed behaviors and roles of female and male. I mean, there's really, how many John Waynes are there in the world, characterizing the male side, really? We all have some place. We all slide a little on that. I've slid all the way. And that's a very different perspective for someone who's in the middle. And understanding that is really important. And they have done that very well.
Thank you. The reason that we were both asked to participate in this is because just like any other population in the world, there's so much diversity in gender, not all gay men are the same. You have very masculine gay men, you have very feminine gay men. There's a spectrum in any population, from one extreme to the other, and everybody in between, and some people that don't even fit into that spectrum. Gender is the same thing. Liz transitioned from male on one side of the spectrum and is transitioning to female on the other side of the spectrum. I'm not transitioning from one to the other. I'm comfortable staying right in the middle. And if you go back to the umbrella picture in your nice little packet, there's a whole list of identities. There's probably 15, 20 labels there that people use, and that was just what I could come up with off the top of my head and remember from the people that I've met. I put in the back of your packet, I included a glossary of gender identity labels because there's so many of them. Not all trans people are the same. Not all gender variant people are the same. And none of their journeys will be the same. It's just, it doesn't happen. We all have our unique paths. We all experience life differently. We all experience gender differently. We all experience coming out differently. We all experience our transition, whatever that transition may be. whether it's a full transition, a partial transition, whatever. It's all unique and different to each individual person. And it goes beyond male, female, going from one to the other, or going from one to the other. There's people in between, and I'm one of those people. And those people that don't fit into one side or the other, or aren't transitioning from one side fully to the other, don't get recognized a lot. We don't get acknowledged a lot. We don't get accepted a lot. People don't even realize that we exist. And I think that's why this topic and doing this presentation was so important to me. Because it's about acknowledging that we exist. That's what it comes down to. We just want to be acknowledged that we exist and we're okay to exist. There's nothing wrong with us. It's not weird. We exist, we're persons, and that's okay. So I guess that would be the thing that I would have you most take away from this, from my perspective of the non-binary individual. Any last comments?
Yeah, Facebook has like 40 different
That was a really big
terms
deal.
for gender that you can use. I haven't looked at them all. It just seems like
that was a really big deal. That happened about a year and a half ago. Facebook opened up the gender options, and that was a huge deal for us. But anyways, the entirety of next week is a discussion panel. The entirety of next week is for the purpose of asking questions. So please write them down, remember them, do whatever you have to do to remember them. Come back next week and ask me all the questions you want. I'm a very open person. Liz seems pretty darn open.
Just no surgery details.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. What an amazing hour. God has certainly created a diverse myriad of people. Praise God. Praise God for you too, sharing your story and your perspective so that those of us that are not on your journey understand more your journey. It's been an amazing hour. Thank you so much. And again, next week, come ready with questions, and it'll be another great hour. So, happy Sunday.